People often believe professional fighters must look like chiseled titans, sculpted from endless hours in the gym, their physiques warning opponents of the punishment to come. But time and again, combat sports prove that muscles don't guarantee victory. In fact, some of the most unforgettable battles have been won by men who defied appearances. Fighters mocked for their shape, underestimated for their size, yet feared once the bell rang. These so-called chubsters turned their mass into might, their durability into weapons, and their willpower into knockout power. Now, you'll witness how these unlikely warriors shattered stereotypes, humbled muscle-bound juggernauts, and proved that in the ring, heart always outweighs appearances. The night opens with a man who redefined the word tank, Ismail Lazaar, a fighter whose very presence feels immovable, an unstoppable wall of flesh and fury. His opponent on this occasion was no slouch, no journeyman picked to pad a record. This was Daniel Sam, better known as the African Terminator, a man with a sculpted frame, built like the kind of fighter posters are made of muscles taut, presence commanding. To most, the matchup looked like David facing a mechanized Goliath. Except Lazaar was no ordinary David. When the bell rang, Lazaar charged forward, his movement fueled with the reckless abandon of a man who seemed to care little for pacing or formality. It was as if he had feasted on a fast food combo before the bout, only to use that meal as jet fuel for violence. Punches flew like artillery shells, each one thudding with a reminder that muscle may flex, but mass absorbs. Sam fired back, launching precise strikes meant to slice through his opponent, but Lazaar's body became a fortress. Every jab and cross that Daniel landed seemed to sink into an endless cushion, smothered by the sheer durability of his opponent. The crowd roared as Lazaar unleashed barrages, smothering Sam against the ropes. For every moment Daniel sought to rally, Lazaar absorbed and retaliated with more ferocity. Then came the Ndinga thunderous combination, topped with a final strike that seemed to short-circuit the bodybuilder's system. Daniel Sam's lights were switched off as if someone had pressed the factory reset button, his towering frame collapsing into the mat. It was the kind of knockout that silenced laughter, that forced skeptics to admit that flesh, when weaponized, is just as deadly as sinew. In the end, not even the mythical Lazarus pit could revive the fallen Terminator. But Lazaar was only the beginning. The spotlight soon fell on another unorthodox gladiator, Vyacheslav, known as much for his unpredictable persona outside the ring as for his savage power within it. Datsik carried chaos in his fists. He had already left his mark on legends like Alexander Emelianenko and Antonio Bigfoot Silva, carving out a reputation as a wrecking ball with no regard for reputations or resumes. His next challenge was a man called Kofi King, a fighter whose path had been one of total destruction, a wrecking machine who had yet to find a rival capable of halting his reign. Promoters billed it as a collision destined to showcase King's dominance. But Datsik had other ideas. From the opening bell, the red-haired powerhouse charged forward, unafraid of the muscle-bound titan before him. Each punch thrown by Datsik looked wild, but the impact was undeniable. King, who had bulldozed others, suddenly found himself on the defensive, his crown slipping with each strike. The pace was relentless, and the chaos overwhelming. It wasn't just a fight, it was a dethroning, a rebellion staged with fists instead of fire. And then, in a sequence that stunned everyone watching, Datsik unleashed the finishing blows, collapsing the so-called king. The monarch's reign ended in seconds, replaced with a new chant, "Long live Datsik." If Datsik embodied chaos, then Chris Huggy Bear Barnett represented joy wrapped in violence. A real-life kung fu panda, Barnett fought with an infectious energy that made fans adore him. His skills were undeniable, his knockouts emphatic, and his celebrations unforgettable. His next test was Travis Wyoff, a seasoned veteran whose nickname, the Iron Man, reflected his resilience and his ability to grind opponents into exhaustion. Travis was built like a rock, and in the early exchanges, he played his game perfectly. From the first bell, he smothered Barnett, tying him up, forcing him into clinches and testing whether the stocky fighter could handle the grind of pressure wrestling. Round after round, it seemed as though Barnett was being smothered under the weight of Wyoff's experience. But Barnett is not a man easily contained. In the second round, he found the opening he had been hunting for. With a sudden burst of energy, he uncorked a punch that detonated on Travis's chin, sending the veteran crashing to the canvas like a felled oak tree. Barnett pounced, raining down blows until the referee was forced to intervene. The crowd erupted, but Barnett wasn't finished. As cameras flashed and the announcement of victory echoed, he celebrated in the way only he could with a spinning belly dance that brought laughter and cheers. A reminder that fighting, though brutal, could also be joyous spectacle. Then came Janjanin, a fighter whose appearance would deceive any casual observer. Short, round, and unassuming, he looked more like a hobbit who had skipped too many diet plans than a destroyer of men. Across from him stood Wolter, a fighter whose physique looked sculpted by the gods themselves, muscles glistening under the lights, a living work of art. As the fight began, Wolter launched into action, firing crisp, powerful shots that seemed destined to end the contest quickly. Yet Drazen moved with surprising agility. Like a heavyweight Neo, he bent and swayed, avoiding the blows that should have ended him. And then, as if scripted by fate, Janjanin saw his opening. A single punch, perfectly placed, detonated on Wolter's jaw. The muscular Adonis crumpled instantly, sent not into sleep but into the shadow realm itself. The crowd gasped, stunned at how such a mountain of muscle could be undone by one well-timed strike. After that shot, only a necromancer could have raised Wolter back to his feet. But if Wolter's downfall was shocking, what came next was poetic justice. Bob Sapp, the notorious giant with a reputation for dirty tactics and antics, had long been viewed as a villain inside the ring. Towering and terrifying, Sapp relied as much on intimidation as on power. But karma always arrives, and this time it came in the extra-large form of Alexander Lungu. When Sapp entered the ring, he carried himself with arrogance, strutting like a snow queen ready to perform a twisted dance of dominance. Yet Lungu had no interest in theatrics. From the opening bell, he marched forward, each punch crashing into Sapp's frame with merciless force. Sapp went down, sprawling onto the mat under the assault. He rose, wobbling, still carrying that sense of defiance, but in truth, he was a marked man. Lungu advanced again, his fists like wrecking balls, and moments later, Sapp was down for good. The giant, so often was humbled, laid low by a man larger, hungrier, and far less tolerant of disrespect.
Rapid judecător gata să fugă de la masa lui. A căzut Bob Sapp. Fericit pe reguli de kickboxing.
And then, of course, we arrive at Roy Big Country Nelson, one of the most beloved heavyweights in combat sports. With his trademark beard and belly, Nelson never looked like the stereotypical fighter. But the truth lay not in appearance, but in the iron inside his gloves. Nelson's overhand right was infamous, a punch that could end a fight in the blink of an eye. Late in his career, Nelson found himself facing Cleckler, a hulking mass of muscles who entered the cage, looking every bit like an armored tank. Cleckler came out firing, his punches sharp and vicious, forcing Nelson to weather an early storm. But Nelson had faced storms before. With a grim determination, he absorbed the punishment, biding his time. Then came the moment fans had seen so many times before. Nelson uncorked his signature right hand, and like Thor wielding Mjolnir, he sent Cleckler crashing into unconsciousness. The roar of the crowd was deafening. The jock with the perfect physique lay motionless. And Nelson, the so-called out-of-shape underdog, stood victorious once again. From Lazaar's storming aggression to Datsik's chaotic dethroning, from Barnett's joyful artistry to Janjanin's hobbit-like miracle punch, from Lungu's karmic destruction of Bob Sapp to Nelson's thunderous right hand, this gallery of moments reminds us that combat sports are never about appearances alone. Muscles may impress, but they don't guarantee victory. Physiques may intimidate, but they don't shield jaws from impact. Time and again, these fighters proved that heart, grit, and willpower outshine aesthetics. And so, as the lights dim and the echoes of applause fade, we are left with a single lesson. Never judge a fighter by the shape of his body. Judge him by the size of his heart, the power of his punch, and the courage he brings when the bell rings. If you enjoyed reliving these unforgettable moments where underdogs turn stereotypes into rubble, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter of fight history. Tell us in the comments which of these knockouts shocked you the most.